Jonathan was born on October 22nd, 1825. Mary Ann was born on November 27th, 1826. Margaret Dan was born on 28 May 1828. John Alden was born on February 19, 1830. William Francis was born on December 12, 1831. The remaining children were born at the farm in Hillsborough, Camden, New York. Isaac Newton was born on September 30, 1833. Robert was born on July 3, 1835. He later died on September 22, 1837. Jesse W. was born on September 19, 1837. Thomas Monroe was born on March 25, 1839. Edward Howard was born on August 18, 1841. Charlotte Melissa was born on February 15, 1845. Lastly, Esther Julia was born on February 15, 1847. Reminiscence of Hillsborough. Meditations by William F. Dan. The recent visit of my wife and me to Hillsborough brought freely to my mind an occurrence which took place 66 years ago the present month. I was very much impressed by the change in the relative proportion of cleared land and forests compared with what it was at the time. 66 years ago, the woods in many places lined one side of the road, and in some places it lined both sides, and there were large stretches of dense virgin forests unbroken by the woodman's axe. In the lowlands, in the southern part of our farm, beyond Little River, grew large number of huckleberry bushes. We often made excursions in the deep spruce and hemlock woods to gather them. One warm Saturday afternoon in August, in the year 1838, we were at work in the hayfield. Father said if we should get hay in the barn early in the afternoon, we, with Mother and him, would go down in the woods over the corresponding vigor. The hay was soon in the barn. It was arranged that I should stay home with the two younger children, Isaac and Jesse. Isaac was 5 years old, Jesse the baby 1 year old, and I was 7. The older children, Jonathan, Margaret, John, and Mary Ann, to whom we are indebted for the account of their experiences in the woods here related, with Father and Mother, got their baskets and the dog, Trusty, and started off in high glee. They crossed the river on a fallen tree and were soon in the huckleberry swamp. The berries were ripe and plentiful. They picked on, wandering off wherever they found them thickest, intent on filling their baskets, hardly noticing which way they were going or taking any note of time. In the deep woods the darkness comes prematurely, and the shadows of night fell around them, ere they were aware of its near approach and the urgent need of finding their way out of the woods before it became too dark. Father called them together, and they started in the direction, as they supposed, toward home. Father became doubtful of his way. The thought occurred to him that the cows might know the way home better than he did, and he tried to drive them without indicating the direction. The cows seemed to be confused and traveled in a circle, taking no particular direction. By this time it was dark. The sun had gone down. A white mist had risen from the ground. The owls hooted in the trees. The nighthawk swooped down upon its prey with its deep, hoarse note, like a groan of pain, but positively awe-inspiring when heard in the gathering gloom of the trackless forest. Further effort to find their way out they saw to be in vain, and might plunge them more deeply in the woods and swamps that surrounded them. They halted on a little knoll of dry ground under a spreading hemlock. The cows gathered around them. The cows and the benighted family seemed to feel the comfort of each other's presence. They milked the cows, ate the berries, and drank the milk for supper. They gathered up the dry leaves for their bed with no covering, save the protecting branches of the trees and the starry canopy above them, Father and Mother on the outside and the children between. Father could sleep under almost any set of circumstances when the time for sleep came. Not so with Mother. She slept little or none at all. Where was the baby who needed her, for he was not yet weaned? What of the little ones beside her, if in their unprotected condition some wild beast should scent and attack them? For bears and panthers had been known to frequent these woods. What would become of the children at home? In these same woods, not long before, she had been picking huckleberries in daylight when she heard a rustle in the bushes. She looked, and there stood before her a black bear on his haunches, looking directly at her. She screamed with fright. The bear dropped upon his feet and trotted off, much to her relief. The cows were restless and moving about, and when the dead branches crackled under their feet, she feared it might be some denizen of the woods about to spring upon them. Towards morning, the dog, Trusty, roused up and barked furiously. She then thought, surely some real danger to them had come, and waked father, who made a cautious reconnaissance and satisfied himself that there was no immediate danger. However, let us return to the children at home. How fared it with them? We followed the happy party through the open pasture, saw them disappear in the woods, and then amused ourselves by breaking open the green pods of milkweeds in filaments on the inside until we grew tired and the baby cried. I stooped down, got him upon my back, and carried him to the house. He still cried. I put him upon his mother's bed and lay down beside him. I tried to quiet him, but all I did was of no avail. He still cried. About dusk, William Barber, a cousin of ours, came in and asked for the folks. We told him they had gone huckleberry picking. He said they must be lost, or they would have been home before this time. We had not even thought of that possibility. He went to our next-door neighbors, the Ford family, and told them of the situation. Mrs. Ford came over immediately, took the baby, who was still crying, and gave him what he so much wanted and so much needed, and what Mrs. Ford knew was of all things in the world best suited to his condition, some mother's milk. For Mrs. Ford had a little baby herself that they had had for themselves, Indian pudding and milk. The Indian pudding had hung on the crane over the fire ever since they had their supper. It had dried to a crisp and came off the kettle in long, thin shavings, was well done, and tasted delicious. My mouth waters for some of it now. I never had a better supper in my life. William Barber went on to the Crawford family and told them the condition of affairs. Archibald Crawford took his brass bugle, a bugle that had seen service in the chase with horses and hounds in the old country, a relic of aristocracy. William took our large couch shell, and both went down to the river, although it was dark and late at night, and blew them all with strength of their lungs and listened for a response. None came from the dense and somber woods, but the distant echo of their own notes. They were finally obliged to return home and abandon the attempt to rescue the lost ones until morning. At the first break of day, the wanderers were astir. They had the same courses for breakfast that they had for supper, fresh milk and berries. The sun rose clear, leaving the points of the compass in no doubt. Father had now no difficulty in determining his course. They took a course due north, driving the cows before them. They had not gone far before they discovered some field of standing wheat. Father tried to keep the cows out of the wheat, and the noise awoke the farmer, who came out of his house in his red nightshirt and red nightcap. He was angry at seeing his wheat trampled down by a herd of cows. A man and several boys, all hallowed and threatened all kinds of vengeance on the intruders. As soon as Father could explain that they had been out all night, lost in the woods, and that the invasion of his wheat field was wholly unintentional, John Thompson, for that was his name, became as kind as before as he had been angry. They together got the cattle out of the wheat and in the road. They now knew where they were, about 2 miles from home in a direct line, although they had traveled much farther than that through the woods. They came out on a crossroad leading from Hillsborough to Oneida Lake, near Patrick Hopkins' farm. If they had continued in a southerly direction while they were in the woods, they would have come out in Cleveland on the south shore of Oneida Lake, about 4 miles distant. The woods they had been in were, at the time, an almost unbroken wilderness, 6 miles long from north to south, and about 3 miles wide from east to west. While beyond these 2 roads that enclosed this piece of woods, the forest spread east and west almost interminably. They reached home about 10 o'clock Sunday morning. It was a joyful reunion of the separated family, the neighbors participating in the general rejoicing over the return of the lost ones, the discomforts of which to those who remained they had done so much to mitigate. The writer of this adventure was so young at the time that, unaided, he would have been wholly unable to have remembered or preserved it as fully as it is here given, but his elder sister, Mary Ann, made it the subject of a school composition a few years later, and thus preserved it to the present time. Later she taught the district school in your village, and perhaps some of the older inhabitants may remember her. She lies in the Don family lot in your beautiful cemetery where she was buried beside her father 31 years ago. At the time of which I write, we lived in a log house on the south side of the road. About halfway between the houses where lived the elder William Ford and Andrew Crawford's house, where now live Hamilton Wilson. The last time I was in Hillsborough, I stood upon the spot where the old house used to stand, as near as I could determine. Not a vestige of it remained to show that it had once occupied the place. Nothing to show where once was a busy home, where the father and mother toiled and rested, where happy children played and carried on the numerous activities that make up home life, where one little child, borne down by disease, had breathed out its latest breath, where the huge wood fire roared up its ample chimney, while stories, riddles, and songs went round its cheerful, wide-spreading circle. All had vanished. The home and its environment lived only in the picture present to my mind. There it stood in its pristine completeness, a castle in the air of what had once been a living reality. A word more of the angry man in the red nightshirt and cap. That was our first introduction to him. Years afterward, he built a house for us. The house was on the Hillsborough Road where now lives William Wall. It was built in 1842. Aeneas Johnson made the framework, and John Thompson finished the inside work. It took him 56 days at $1 a day and board.